Introduction to Digital Photography. Camera sensors. Learning outcomes. In this topic, we will take a closer look at sensor sizes in digital cameras. By the end of this video, you will have a better understanding of what the various sensor sizes mean and what suits you should you decide to purchase your own camera. What is a sensor? Nowadays, every digital camera is cored with a solid-state device which works like film cameras do, in that it captures light when it enters through the lens, and this produces a digital image. This device is called a sensor. The evolution of digital technology has meant that there are different sensor types and sizes available on the market today. Photographers now have the choice between many different cameras with differently sized sensors, and most are within the same price range. Like a lot of things, each sensor type has both advantages and disadvantages. Given the fact that there is such a variety out there, it's important to know what these types are, especially if you're considering investing a substantial sum of money into a new model. When buying a new camera, you should always examine the sensor size. Photolithography. We have already mentioned that a sensor is a solid-state device which captures the light needed to form a digital image. Essentially, this device is created by using wafers of silicon that are used as the base for the circuit. Why silicon? Well, when light hits it, you get electrons. They are then built up by a process known as photolithography. Sensitized sheets of wafer are set aside and patterns of the circuitry are repeatedly projected onto it. Then, the wafer is treated to ensure that only the pattern is left. Interestingly, this process shares many similarities with the traditional photographic processes. These are the people who work in dark rooms when developing film, and also those who work in the printing business. In the second lesson, we talked about the role of bits and bytes. Pixels, too, are very important in digital photography, and this process creates millions of tiny pixels. In each pixel, there will be a light-sensitive element. This element can count the number of photons that have arrived at that particular site. The charge output from each site is proportional to the intensity of light that falls onto it. So, this ensures that the scene can be replicated almost identically to the way in which the photographer initially saw it. Let's look at the steps that are needed for this to occur. As the sensor is an analog device, this charge requires conversion into a signal. This signal is amplified, and then we have its conversion into what we call the digital form. This process ensures that we will see an assortment of diverse objects and colors. However, computers work a little differently, and so each pixel is given a number, a 0 or a 1. As we've already noted, when you zoom far enough into any digital image, you will notice that each pixel is simply a single coloured square. This is what makes up every single digital image that we see. As we have said, a sensor is an analog device, but it also has traits of colour blindness. The sensor relies on a plate of mosaic coloured filters, so that it will be able to see different colours. This plate, which covers the sensor, has twice as many green filters as there are of each red and blue. The ratio is like this because our eyes have a heightened sensitivity for the colour green. As some of you might already know, this means that each pixel can only get colour information for either red, green, or blue. So, a procedure known as demosaicing is implemented to solve the values for the other two colours. The alternative to this system, the Foveon sensor, uses layers of silicon to absorb diverse wavelengths, and this results in each site getting full colour information. The development of sensors has been staggering, with more and more pixels added to improving models. The earliest types were not sufficient for the demands of printing, so advancement was needed, and compact cameras that once had 2 or 3 megapixels were soon replaced by the next generation of 4 or 5 megapixel models. This has now escalated up to 20 megapixel compact cameras on the market today. More pixels can mean more detail, but the size of the sensor is vital for this to stand on its own. Smaller pixels are less efficient than larger ones. The main qualities which separate images from compact cameras, which have a small sensor, than those from higher-end DSLRs, which are equipped with a large sensor, are dynamic range and noise. With DSLRs, the pixels can be enlarged. As a result, they have the capacity to retain more light relative to the noise created by the sensor when it operates. This means that we get a cleaner image. Noise reduction technology. Noise reduction technology is incorporated into many modern cameras. This technology is designed to conceal any noise which has formed in the image. However, at present, this can compromise detail in your image. Entry-level cameras will have this as a standard option, and it's likely that you will be unable to switch it off. Higher-end cameras, on the other hand, give you the option to do so. This ensures that you can allow yourself the time to process it out at a later time. The increased capacity of larger pixels ensures that they can hold more light before they are full. Full pixels are undesirable, as they take shape as blown highlights. Should this occur on a busy sensor, the charge from one pixel could run off to neighbouring sites. Think of it like a tap running water into a full bucket, while there are other buckets spread around the full bucket. This is known as blooming, and we will be looking at this a little later when we come to exposure and colour lessons. By contrast, a larger pixel can contain a bigger array of tonal values before this occurs. Some variations of the sensor have been integrated with anti-blooming gates, which use a channel that can hold off any excess charge. As a trade-off, the gates use space on the sensor, and this would reduce the size of each individual pixel. Types of sensor. CCD sensor. The CCD sensor was always very popular when working with video and stills cameras. This sensor was favoured because it provided superior image quality when compared to CMOS sensors. They were equipped with solid dynamic range and noise control. Even in the present day, you will find them used in some budget compacts, primarily in the disposable cameras you get at tourist sites. They needed higher power consumption and their construction was very basic. Today, CMOS sensors have taken their place, although you may see them in medium format backs where the qualities of CMOS technology are not needed. CMOS sensor. As we've seen, the CMOS sensor has developed and bettered the CCD model. Nowadays, the chip has much more built-on functionality, and so CMOS sensors have the capacity to perform using less power, while also having the ability to manage high-speed capture. They are needed for DSLRs that use burst or continuous high-speed shooting. Foveon X3 sensor. The Foveon X3 sensor is designed on CMOS technology. This sensor ignores the bare filter array and uses 3 layers of silicon instead. In this situation, shorter wavelengths are absorbed closer to the surface. Longer wavelengths need to travel further. As each photo location gets a value for the colours red, green and blue, demosaicing is not needed. Full frame 36 by 24 mm. I want to introduce you to a term known as full frame, which is 36 by 24 mm. This is the largest sensor size found in 35 mm DSLRs. It's modelled on the frame of traditional 35 mm negative film, so that no crop factor is applied to the lens. Years ago, only professional camera users used them, but nowadays, the technology has become more accessible to the public. In addition, full-frame sensors would only be built into big cameras, but through the years of engineering and the study of human-computer interaction, manufacturers can now produce lighter cameras that can hold bigger sensors. Some camera models with full-frame sensor include the Canon EOS 5D Mark III, the Canon EOS 6D, and the Nikon D5. So, what have we learned in this lesson? We've learned about pixels and how important they are in digital photography. We've also learned that there are 3 main sensor types: CCD, CMOS, and the Foveon X3.